This episode of The Startup Life is brought to you by PeopleReady. Startup Nation, you have a lot on your plate. The last thing you need to stress about is finding quality staff or the available work you need to be successful. Save time and headache by working with a trusted staffing partner that meets your everyday needs. PeopleReady is a national staffing provider with over 600 locations across the country and 30 plus years of experience serving people just like you. They specialize in a variety of industries including retail, manufacturing, logistics, general cleaning, hospitality, construction, and more. PeopleReady understands that you're busy and on the go. That's where their mobile app, JobStack, comes in. Use the app to place orders or find work 24/7 or wherever you are. And as social distancing continues to change the way we interact with customers, colleagues, and our everyday lives, JobStack provides the ability to find the right temporary workers or work you need while eliminating the amount of physical touch points needed in the staffing process. Visit peopleready.com/startup life to learn more about how you can partner with PeopleReady.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, as we go forth on our path to entrepreneurship or in our career field, we're always looking to get some of that time back. We're always told that time is a very valuable asset, and sometimes we get kind of addicted to our calendars and stuff like that, but we have the perfect guest to kind of bring us into the light and kind of help us out with that. He is a graduate at Cal Berkeley, where he majored in electrical engineering and computer science. He also received a master's in business administration. He is the former chief information officer at Facebook, where he helped to become the most productive company in the world. He also says that calendars are stupid. We're going to talk about that a little bit, which is why he also is the co-founder and CEO of Woven, a calendar app that makes shared scheduling much easier, a first step along the way to better managing your time. He is Tim Campos. T-Camp, how's it going, my man?
It's going fantastic. Thanks for having me today.
No worries, no worries. Are you ready to pour some knowledge in the Startup Nation today?
I am ready. I'm excited about this.
All righty, let's do it. Today's Startup Nation, today's show is brought to you by Light Memphis, or Let's Innovate Through Education. And we have a really special guest. My good friend, Avani Garde, is in the building. Avani, how's it going, ma'am?
Going well. I'm so glad to be here.
All righty. So she's going to help us out with our conversation with Tim today. But Tim, let's get back to you, man. If you would, please, sir, kind of share with us your origin story to who Tim is and what he's all about.
All right. Well, so I am the child of immigrant parents. My father came to this country from the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And he grew up in New York City, and big part of his background was, his family didn't have a lot of money, so the focus was education and achieving success through education. And so my father, was able to basically pay his way through college and everything through scholarship, and that became sort of the backdrop that I grew up in. My father ended up marrying the daughter of a history professor at Cornell University, and so my mother is, child of academics. My father's an academic, and everything became about academics. And I'll give you a little secret to my family. I'm not the smartest one in the family by a long shot. Okay. My parents are both brilliant. I have an older sister who's just absolutely incredible in terms of her level of intelligence. And so I grew up not feeling like I was very smart because I was just surrounded by all these people. And that was actually kind of difficult for me. And I kind of fell into technology because it was this thing that I could control. I really enjoyed taking things apart and seeing how they worked. And eventually my dad would get mad at me because I would break everything. So he wanted me to put them back together after I took them apart. And I got into that. And, eventually as I did that more and more, I realized that I wanted to be an engineer. I really liked building things. And so that's what sort of motivated my high school focus with science and math and things like that, and then into college. And the reason I focused on electrical engineering and computer science. And that just became my love. I was fortunate at the end of my freshman year at UC Berkeley. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for the summer, and I got my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, encouraged me to apply for this internship. Now, the internship was something. Anyways, cut a long story short, I applied. She kept telling me to follow up with them, and they weren't interested in me. But the one thing that she did tell me to do is just keep following up, make sure that they got my application, that they made a decision on it. And eventually they called me back and they said, look, please stop calling because we're not going to hire you.
Gotcha.
But what happened was a few weeks later, I got a call back from them because they had offered the internship to somebody else who got appendicitis. So they couldn't do the internship. And by the time they realized this, all the other students had gotten other internships. So I was the top of the list of the people that were still available because I had been so perseverant and reached out to them so much. And so they called me in for the interview, and then I got the job. That internship never ended. I ended up working at this company. It was called Sybase throughout my college career. At the end of the summer internship, they said, look, we really love what you're doing. We want you to stick around and we'll help you pay for school. So that's how I paid for a lot of my education, and I ended up getting a lot of great work experience at the same time. Ended up graduating from UC Berkeley with a degree in electrical engineering and 3.5 years of work experience at Sybase, and that really launched me in my career. And I've been in technology ever since. Gotcha. And the one other thing about my background that's notable is I've always loved business. As a kid, I had a paper route when I was 10 or 11 years old, and I made a lot of money off this paper route. And I always had, I like, jobs and businesses. I started a, lawn mowing business and made a lot of money mowing people's lawns. And I was working, I was very fascinated, not just by how you build technology, but how you sell it and how you make money off of it. And so I paid a lot of attention to those things. And with time, that got me interested in the business side of organizations, which is why I got into IT.
Gotcha.
IT is really the use of technology to achieve a business outcome. And that led me ultimately to become the CIO of a company called KLA 10 Core. And then after a few years, I decided to leave KLA, and that ended up landing me at Facebook. And there's an interesting story there. I'm sort of skipping over a very interesting thing, which we can drill into if we want to. But started at Facebook in 2010 and spent another almost 7 years at just a fantastic, amazing company, helping them to make the world more open and connected. And my role in it was to help make Facebook more productive in the process of that.
Gotcha.
So that's me. I mean, I'm a technologist that really is because technology is exciting to me because it's something I can control. I love the fusion of technology and business. And I've had a few of these really interesting life moments where a lot of my success isn't because it was preordained, but either because somebody was encouraging me to be perseverant and work hard, or because I did things that were a bit unconventional that ultimately helped me to achieve some of the success that I have achieved in my career. So I'll stop there. I don't know if that was longer than you needed.
No, that was
my life story.
No, that was perfect. Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to point out something and ask a follow-up question, if I could. Startup Nation, one of the things Tim said I thought was just very important. You talk about that persistence and the consistency when he was talking about the job, where he ultimately kind of got a shot at and stuff like that. And I think that's important as we engage in our career and our path of entrepreneurship. But I want to ask you this, because you say you've always liked business and stuff like that, and you had the paper route and you had the mowing business, stuff like that. And you like sales more than anything. What is one of those things about sales that's true about a lawnmower business, a paper route, or as the co-founder and CEO of Woven? What's one of those things you still hold on to as one of those sales tenets that you use even today?
Actually, I'll take exception to one thing you said. I'm not sure I like sales.
Okay, fair enough.
I find sales very hard, very challenging. But I'll answer your question.
Okay.
You can't get what you don't ask for.
Fair enough.
This is one of the things that salespeople are particularly good at, is they are comfortable with the idea that somebody's going to say no. And so they don't mind asking, right? They don't mind saying, hey, do you want to buy my product? No, I don't want to buy it. Well, how about I change the price? No, I still don't want to buy it. Oh, well, tell me what you're interested in. You know, what would you want to buy? I want to buy something else. Well, let me tell you why my product is, you know, like this something else that you're looking at. And then they're very, very good at that. And I think one of the things that I have always struggled with personally, I don't like no, right? I like it when the answer is yes, but you know, we have to be comfortable with no. I think some of the best salespeople, really, I don't even think this is limited to sales. I think some of the most successful people in life are willing to accept no. And for me, I've had to be conscious about that. I've had to sort of wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, you know, today's going to be one of those days. I'm going to do something tough and it's going to be hard, and I'm going to be willing to accept failure, or I'm going to be willing to accept no. But because I do that, it makes it possible for me to get a yes.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you said there was a very interesting story about how you got the Facebooks. Well, now it's story time, Tim. Let's hear that story if you don't mind.
Well, okay. So I had become the CIO of this company, KLA Tencor. And I like to call KLA Tencor the biggest company that nobody's ever heard of.
Okay.
Biggest company in the Silicon Valley that nobody's ever heard of.
Okay.
They make equipment that make semiconductors, chips, cheaper.
Okay. Yeah.
And, you know, the reason why you can buy an iPhone and you know, for the price that you can is in part because of what KLA Tencor does. So big company, good company. But, you know, after working there I was there almost 7 years, I just found that it was not the place for me. I wanted to learn more about business, but this was not a business I was that interested in. I wasn't that interested in the semiconductor industry. And two, it's a very ruthless industry. You have to be willing to, you know, I spent a lot of time cutting jobs and outsourcing and offshoring things, and that just wasn't something that I was getting a lot of personal enjoyment out of. And I found that after a while, it was really eating into my soul. I was not the best version of me that I felt I could be.
Gotcha.
And so I did something that was very, you know, unconventional at the time. I quit, you know, and I just said, look, I'm ready to go do something else. I didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I didn't want to do what I was doing, and I needed to sort of have a fresh pair of eyes. So I did what I call career skydiving. I had confidence in myself. I knew that I would be able to get a job.
Right.
Now, I quit in August of 2000, or maybe it was October of 2008. And, you know, as an executive, you don't leave right away. When you quit, you want to have an orderly transition. So it actually ended up taking 9 months for me to leave the company.
Gotcha.
So I ended up walking out the door in the middle of 2009. Now, if you go back in time, that is one of the worst times this country has seen in terms of, it was a financial crisis.
Right.
And, you know, we're going to find out soon if what we're going through right now is worse than that was. But, you know, it was not a good time to not have a job, and to walk away from a perfectly good executive role seemed really crazy. And a lot of people thought I was nuts. But what I did is I went back to business school. This is when I went to get my MBA. That both helped me sort of refresh my brain, helped me focus on learning. One of the best investments one can ever make is in themselves. I met a bunch of new people who became really close friends, people who became my co-founder, people who became just very important parts of my life.
Right.
You know, that also gave me the space to start thinking about what I wanted to do next. And that's when Facebook came along.
Gotcha.
And had I not quit KLA Tencor, had I not taken that risk and, you know, spent the time focusing on myself, I don't think I would have been even in the running, even in consideration for Facebook. And they may not have even been able to find me because I would have been so focused doing a job I didn't like. So that's how I ended up getting to Facebook. And I think the thing that I like to impart on people is that, you know, career progression is not a straight line. It's not like you started a company and you just get promoted and eventually you become the CEO. That happens, but it's rare. Sometimes you got to take a step back in order to take a step forward.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing that, because you're absolutely right. A lot of times we get so inundated with the everyday grind and stuff like that sometimes we forget to kind of step outside of that thing we're doing to kind of get a broad, you know, a bird's eye view of everything's going on. And then sometimes when you do that, like, you know what, maybe it's time for something different. Maybe it's time for something new. So I appreciate you sharing that, Tim.
Yeah. You know, you have to be able to see the forest through the trees.
For sure.
And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see in people that are close to me that I care about, is that it's easy to get caught up in what you're doing and not take a step back and ask the question, why? Why am I doing this? And is this accomplishing what I want to? Whether it's for me or for the team or for the organization or for the company or for the world, that why is actually really important.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, Tim rose the ranks and became, there at Facebook, the chief information officer of Facebook, where he doubled overall productivity to $1.8 million per employee, making it the most productive company in the world. And so obviously, if you're in the C-suite, you get to hang out with a certain famous founder that we all know and love, Mark Zuckerberg. So what are some of those things that you kind of, learned from him, seen from him as a leader of Facebook?
One of the things, and I think I can even tie it to what's going on today, that right. I learned about Mark. You'll hear me call him Zuck. That's how we refer to him inside the company.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was going to refer to him as Zuck because I just feel like that's something you would call Mark Zuckerberg if you knew him, right? But go ahead.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things about him that I learned and then I admired about him. One is that he's a very principled leader. So a principled leader, and they kind of have like a formula for how they make decisions.
Absolutely.
And it's rational and not emotional.
Right.
Which is not to say that Zuck isn't emotional.
Of course.
He does an emotional guy. He sort of gets teased for coming across as robotic, but that's not him. I mean, he's actually a very caring individual. But he's principled in his leadership, so that you're going to get the same decision from him yesterday as you're going to get tomorrow. It's not going to be dependent on his mood. It's not going to be dependent on what other people are saying about him or what other people are saying about the company. The second thing is he's very well researched. So he doesn't just happenstance on these principles. If he doesn't know how he should make a certain decision, he thinks about it and he reads about it and he learns about it. Or sometimes he decides these are decisions I'm not going to be good at, and he hires other people to do it, and he empowers them to make those decisions. That's how he got people like Cheryl and Jay Parikh and Mike Schrepfer and other people that have been a key part of making a lot of the decisions that have made Facebook what it is. So he's very, very much principled in his approach. He's well researched. And then the last thing is that he expects people to challenge him. He wants people to challenge him. He doesn't want a bunch of yes people around him.
Gotcha.
When I've been in the room with Zuck and we're making tough decisions, one of the early experiences I had with him is that we were trying to make a decision on what to do with a system that I was responsible for, and everybody wanted to go on one path. And I didn't really agree with that, but I hadn't said it yet. And he saw this in my face. He saw that I didn't agree with the decision, and he called me out and he gave me the floor. He said, "Tim, you don't agree with this decision, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he's like, "Okay, well, tell me what." And I did. And he listened. And, at the end of it, I said, "I think there's a better way. And I think I need about 2 weeks to prove that this better way would work. And if not, we'll do the way that everybody else wants to do it." And he gave me the 2 weeks, and then we ended up doing the thing that I was recommending. But, I think the key part of this is that one of his big things is making sure that he's got the right people around him that are willing to challenge him, say the things that are uncomfortable. And, he is going to either make the decision based on the principles that he's thought about, or he's going to let you make the decision. He's not going to make a rash decision, an uninformed decision. And I think he's still this way today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. I think we're kind of seeing that with, some of the stuff that's going on at Facebook now, with a certain decision about, President Trump's, Facebook posts and stuff like that. And once again, Startup Nation, we are an apolitical show. We do not kind of dive. That's not in our lane. But I want to ask you this, if I may, Tim. If, because when you're in the C-suite, you're not only doing what you do as, chief information officer at the time, but you're also like an advisor as well. And like you said, Mark, or Zuck, as you call him, likes for you to kind of like challenge some of his, maybe processes or ways he goes about, his principled thinking and stuff like that. If you were still at Facebook today, how would you advise him as he navigates going through what he's going through right now at Facebook and stuff like that? Because I imagine what he's going through is pretty difficult because, you're trying to balance between, what's harmful and free speech and stuff like that. So kind of share with me a little bit, if you would, Tim.
Yeah, it's a very tough question.
Absolutely. I know.
I'll start by saying that I'm kind of glad I'm not there because I think the challenges that the company has had since I left are really hard and really tough. And
absolutely.
They need a class of leader, which isn't so much about growth and productivity and all that, but really about understanding society and empathy and things like that.
Right.
To answer your question, I think the one piece, I think Zuck makes a lot of well-informed decisions. He's, as I said before, he's very principled, and that's why he's makes a decision. He has always been of the mindset that Facebook should not be in the editorial business, for example.
Enough.
So it shouldn't pick sides, regardless of what the side is, and that can put the company on the opposite side of what the popular belief is,
right?
Because it doesn't want to pick a side. But the one thing that I have found after leaving Facebook that I think sometimes the people within the company struggle to see, and I would advise Zuck on, is that you do have to look at the impact that you're having on society.
Gotcha.
For myself, I often ask my question, what makes me happy? What makes me feel good? And, when I first started working at Facebook, I loved using the product. I loved to see what my friends were doing, what other people in the company, were doing. And it brought joy to me. And I could stay in touch with people that I didn't live with anymore. I used to live in Central Illinois, and I hadn't seen many of these people until I got reconnected to them on Facebook, and I loved that.
Right.
But, at some point, I think that the conversation started to shift on Facebook, and it's not a place that I think many people get joy. Some people do. But it's often like, who's got the fancier house and who's got the better vacation and and when you get into things like politics, who's right and who's wrong. And there's no right answer to these things.
Right. Of course.
They cause, an emotional response. And I'm not sure that emotional response is always healthy and positive. So I would encourage him to think a little bit more about that in terms of the impact that the company is having on society. But, these are very complicated questions.
Gotcha.
And, I think one thing that's we live in amazing times. We've never before in the history of mankind had the type of interconnection that we have with the internet and, with things like Facebook.
Right.
So we're figuring it out as a society along the way. And that's, we're going to learn some things that might be uncomfortable and hard. I think we have learned some things about how we relate to each other, for example.
Right.
And I think we all have to take responsibility for, taking that and then making adjustments with it. And Facebook's no exception. I think there might be some changes that could make that product a little bit better for society.
I hear that.
I'll stop there.
No, for sure. Thank you so much. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Very much a Facebook fan, and the company is a fantastic company, so I don't want my words to be misinterpreted as too much criticism.
Of course not. And I was not trying to put you in a precarious position or anything like that. This, like I said, I'm not an investigative journalist or anything, but I just thought it was interesting to ask to kind of like how you would advise them and stuff like that. So I appreciate your willingness to answer and that transparency. I appreciate that. We want to go ahead and transition. Once again, we're talking to Tim Campos, the co-founder and CEO of Woven, and I'm actually going to kick it over to my guest superstar here. So as I said earlier, this episode is sponsored by Light Memphis. Let's innovate through education. LightMemphis.org is the website. There's a link in the show notes if you listen to the replay on the podcast. Now, Light Memphis is on a mission to equip African American and Latinx students with 21st century skills to create wealth. And they just recently had a pitch night, and one of my proud mentees was one of those winners of pitch night, Miss Avani Garde. Avani, are you still there?
I am.
All right. If you would, just kind of, I know you have a question to ask Tim, but before you do that, just kind of share with Tim, about your pitch and your idea before you ask your question.
Yeah, so where this started, actually, my idea. So I'm taking, I'm sure you've heard of this, advanced placement classes in high school. They're supposed to equip us for college and give us more opportunities with exams and college credit, things like that. So I was taking an AP computer science class this year, and my school had trouble finding a new teacher. Our teacher retired last year, and we just couldn't find a new one. So instead, the school got a grant to teach us an online course. So we would take AP Computer Science A as an online course. We would learn Java online through videos, things like that. And at first, it worked pretty well. Like, it was self-paced. All the students could go at whichever pace they wanted. We could figure out what we wanted to do and when. We were able to prioritize. But then as we started getting into harder and harder concepts, it was harder for us to learn the programming concepts. We didn't have anyone to ask questions to. We were just watching videos on playback that were recorded years ago. It was just really tough. And so I was thinking, what would it be like if we had someone that we could just ask one or two questions without needing to pay monthly subscriptions or needing to hire a tutor? Maybe we just have a question or two about a project. So my idea is a website that partners coding experts with students so that students can ask questions one-on-one and learn to solve the problems by thinking computationally as opposed to just getting the answer and plugging it in. So essentially it's like a tutoring service, but the first few questions can be asked for free before students need to pay. And so it's just a way for kids to get help with their problems as opposed to having to hire tutors or online subscriptions.
Awesome.
Oh, fantastic.
That is fantastic. Thank you. And you had a question for Tim.
Yes, I did, actually. I was really interested in your journey as you left Facebook and you decided to create Woven. What made you create that decision?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to some of the things we've been talking about, because I ask myself a lot, what makes me happy? And in fact, Facebook asks this questions of their employees. Every 6 months, they do a engagement survey. And the question specifically is, how much time do you spend on things that you love? And I found that for myself, that question was, that number was going down. That percentage was going down. And in the beginning of 2016, it caused me to really think, well, what do I love to do? What do I want to do? And what I loved is I love building the company. And I feel like I came to Facebook at a time where it was kind of the corporate equivalent of a teenager. It wasn't a startup anymore, so it wasn't a baby. It could walk, it could talk, but it still hadn't learned how to, be a real business. And by 2016, it had become kind of a grown up. And the things that it had in front of it were less about company building and more about just becoming an even bigger behemoth than it already was. And what I wanted to do was to go in the opposite direction. I wanted to go create something from scratch, to create something new, which I couldn't do at Facebook. Even I really loved the company. Right. And that basically motivated me to think about becoming an entrepreneur, to leave the company and to start something. So that's what the initial motivation was. And then in terms of the area, I spent a lot of time thinking about what matters to me and what would be something that would be worthy of spending the next, 5 to 10 years of my life on. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that, which is what led me towards Woven.
All right, Startup Nation. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. This episode of The Startup Life is tucked in nice and tight by Stein and the Stein Sleep Bracelet. Startup Nation, getting quality sleep is super important, especially for those of us as entrepreneurs. I know for me, if I don't get enough quality sleep, not only do I not perform well while working in my business or exercising, but also it really affects my mental health, and that doubt starts to creep in. And that's the last thing we want as entrepreneurs. Also, with everything going on, good quality sleep is important to repair the body and support a good immune system. And that is why, Startup Nation, I wear the Stein sleep bracelet. The Stein sleep bracelet uses natural frequency technology to reinforce our biomagnetic field to improve deep sleep, length of sleep, and overall sleep quality. This helps produce a healthier heart, regulate weight control, and helps strengthen the immune system, which helps destroy bacteria and viruses. Right now, when you go to philipstein.com, use code SLEEPEZ and you will get 10% off the entire store. That's promo code SLEEP, capital E, capital Z. So if you are ready to be more productive in leading your business, go with the Stein sleep bracelet, proven to be natural and safe to give you a better, deeper sleep. This episode of The Startup Life is brought to you by the Risk Management Society. Startup Nation, the Risk Management Society, or RIMS, is a global organization dedicated to the profession of risk management. For nearly 60 years, RIMS has delivered the latest strategies and resources that allow risk professionals to grow, innovate, and succeed in any business. RIMS works with industry leaders to produce content and online training that business professionals turn to. Topics include business continuity, cyber risk, risk management techniques, the fundamentals of insurance, and more. There is also a private members-only site where people can discuss sensitive issues and get honest answers. Members have been leaning on each other as we all navigate this global pandemic. If you're concerned about the safety of your employees and the sustainability of your organization, you need the resources and connections RIMS provides. Learn more at go.rims.org/startup life. If you're listening to the replay on the podcast, we have a link there in the show notes. You can save 25% off a year-long membership. So if you're ready to get the resources and strategies you need to manage risk, go with RIMS and join their global network of over 10,000 members across more than 60 countries. Support for The Startup Life is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Startup Nation, personal grooming is super important, not only from a hygiene standpoint, but also from a confidence one as well. And that is why you need to have a tight haircut and, well, a nice groomed undercarriage as well. And when doing that, you don't want to use the same razor, do you? That's just absurd. And this is why our friends at Manscaped have given you another option. Introducing the all-new Lawnmower 3.0 by Manscaped. This lightweight and waterproof razor features precision engineered blades for safe trimming in sensitive areas and a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology. Ladies, Father's Day is just around the corner, and this will make a perfect gift for that guy on the go. Use code TheStartupLife in all caps for 20% off and free shipping on your brand new Lawnmower 3.0 at manscaped.com. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast. And while you're there, be sure to check out all the other products from manscaped.com as well. So for proper manscaping without the fear of hurting anything, go with Manscaped. Trust me, your family of jewels will thank you. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. And once again, that brings us to Woven, where it started to reimagine how people use time so they can spend time on what matters most to them. Their vision begins with scheduling, but it extends well beyond that. So kind of share with us the Woven story and your typical doctrine when it comes to productivity in the workplace.
Well, I mean, as I said, as I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to start a company, but that wasn't actually enough. I needed to have not just an idea, but I wanted it to have a mission that I cared about.
Right.
And one of the things that I had always felt is that I always felt like I was running out of time. I always felt like I didn't have enough time to spend with my kids or to, focus on things that would be better for me, like exercise. And it was not really the right way to think about the problem, because in some respects, you have as much time as you take for things.
Right.
Time is really a choice. We all have the same amount of time. There's no difference between Mark Zuckerberg and me in terms of how many minutes he has in a day. I mean, the guy's worth $1 bazillion. He still only has 24 hours in a day.
Right.
And same thing with me. Same thing with all of us. We all have the same amount of time. So what really matters is how we spend that time. And do we spend it on the things that matter most? And that to me was a problem that was interesting. How do I help other people spend time on the things that matter most to them? And that's what got me thinking about, where do we keep track of our time? we got lots of these information systems to keep track of our friends on Facebook, to keep track of our messages in email, to keep track of, our notes in things like Evernote. We have places to keep track of our photos with like Apple Photos or Google Photos. We have all these different places. What's the place where we keep track of time? Well, the only place that I found that most people use, or that many people use, is the calendar.
Gotcha.
And then I started realizing, you know what? This piece of technology is ripe for disruption. It needs to be different. It's not enough for it to do what it does today, because really it's like a diary. In fact, that's what it was. Before there was email, there was memoranda, and it just got digitized. So email became the electronic memorandum. Before there were PowerPoints, there were cellophane slides. That's why they're called slides.
Right.
Because people would really put them in the slide projector in order to display them. So the calendar was a diary. It was, if you wanted to do something on a particular day, you would write a piece of paper. I want to do this particular thing. I want to meet with somebody at this time. I want to get this job done. And that got digitized. But that's really only a small piece of the puzzle. The calendar, as we know it today, keeps track of time, when. It keeps track of title, of what. It keeps track of a location sometimes. And it keeps track of who we're doing with it. That would be participants. And sometimes it includes some instructions of how to get into an event. That would be the description. That's it. There's nothing inside of your calendar that says, did you spend time on what matters most? There's no way to answer that question with your calendar. It doesn't even know what matters most to you.
Right.
And it certainly doesn't know what you're actually spending your time on. So that's what I wanted to address with Woven, is to take where the calendar stops and complete it, help it complete its mission to become this part of our lives that can help us choose to spend time on the things that make a difference. And everybody's choices here are going to be different. Like, I want to spend time on my company. I want to spend time with my family. Somebody else may want to spend a lot of time, in a philanthropic endeavor. Other
Right.
people may just want to spend time, caring for other people. Everybody's choices here are different, and there's no right or wrong to it. I don't want to, suggest that everybody should be starting companies, for example. But we do all have goals, and if we can achieve those goals by being a little bit more deliberate and on how we're spending our time, on what we are spending that time, then we can achieve the things that we're trying to accomplish in life. And that's ultimately what Woven is all about. And it does this by trying to become a more intelligent version of your calendar, helping you schedule and put things on the calendar. It also helps you keep track of where you're spending your time. What are the types of things that you're spending your time on? And with this, we help people to make better decisions about how to organize and run their lives, which ultimately helps them to become more productive.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. And that website, Startup Nation, is woven.com. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast, or you can just go to your app store, whether it be, the Apple store or the Google Play store, and download the Woven app. I actually have downloaded the Woven app myself, and I love the usability and how easy it is to use. But, Tim, if you would just kind of share some of the features it has. Like, I know I was kind of interested in the availability, sharing, and the group polls.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest problems with spending time, if you're trying to do something, whether it's a dinner party with friends or you're trying to coordinate an important meeting in order to make a decision, is scheduling. Scheduling is a very time-consuming part of using a calendar. In fact, the busiest people in the world have to hire a full-time professional. They're called administrative assistants, executive assistants, to do nothing other than calendar for them. And so we wanted to build some technology to just make this simpler. And it starts with, we have some scheduling technology that allows you to schedule an event on your calendar with something just as simple as a link, the same kind of link that you might share for going to a website or accessing a document.
Right.
You can share with other people, which is, here's access to my calendar. so that you can schedule time with me. And these links are really smart. They can not only configure themselves to describe the event the way that you want, color it, include other people if necessary, but they can also look across your calendars. So if you've got like a work calendar and a personal calendar, it can make sure that you're free on both before time is offered to somebody else.
Right.
And as you pointed out, sometimes, you're trying to coordinate with several people, so you need input from them.
Right.
You need, 5 different people to say, which of these different times is going to work for them. And so Woven includes a feature to allow people to vote or poll on times so that you can find the time that works best for people. So it all comes down to this really magical capability, which is a scheduling link that's easy to share, easy to create, and very smart and very powerful for scheduling meetings with other people.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Like I said, we're all looking forward to trying to get some of that time back and stuff like that. And we always hear about people having productivity hacks and calendar hacks and stuff like that. How do you feel about stuff like that?
One of the easiest and most powerful productivity hacks. This is the number one nugget for your listeners. You get what you spend time on. You will accomplish what you spend time on.
Gotcha.
The easiest way to do that is to schedule that time. Put it on the calendar and hold yourself accountable to doing it. If I want to go to the gym 3 times a week, put it on your calendar and use your calendar to remind you that, oh yeah, I'm supposed to go to the gym today. I want to do that, first thing in the morning, and make sure that you do it. Hold yourself to that. Just the same way that you would if you put a meeting with somebody else, you're going to actually show up to that meeting. And so time blocking and using the calendar to allocate your time on things that really matter is one of the best things that you can do to be more productive. It just helps you retain focus on what it is that you want to accomplish. Maybe it's putting together this really important pitch deck for a new entrepreneurial venture that you're creating. Maybe it is following up with friends that you haven't contacted in a while. Maybe it is completing this really important task at work. When you put it on the calendar, you have a much greater tendency to actually do it because now you're using the calendar to remind you, and you're not going to put something else on there. So it really encourages you to be focused and organized and disciplined about how it is that you're trying to spend your time because, like I said, it's the most valuable asset we have. There is only 24 hours in a day. Most people sleep for 6 to 8 of those hours. On top of that, you got to eat. You've got to, spend time with others. So it really only comes down to, 40 hours or so a week of time that you can allocate to something that you really want to do. Usually that's your profession. So how are you going to allocate that time? What are you going to do? And answering that question for yourself in a deliberate and proactive manner will help you achieve those goals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I got a quick follow-up question because I came across an article from businessinsider.com where it talks about your pitch deck with you and your co-founder, Burke Arpat. You came up with this pitch deck. What goes into a great pitch deck? What goes into a great pitch, mind you? Because we have a lot of startup founders who have to go through that process to try to get that startup capital, to get those investment dollars. So kind of share with us a little bit about that. Yeah.
It's a tough process, and I think the first thing that goes in is grit and courage.
Gotcha.
And you're not going to see those on the slide, but they're the most important things because at the end of the day, most people, particularly for the early stage of the company, they're not investing in a PowerPoint slide. They're investing in you. So they want to know who you are. Why is it that you are going to be able to accomplish what you say you're going to accomplish? What is that? And then how does that create, a business outcome that might be attractive for their investment, whatever their investment thesis is? So it really starts with the character attributes of the individual. Now, within that, when you start building out these slide decks, I find that the most important thing to lead with is who is the team? Who are the people that are going to be building this company? Because that establishes credibility. I mean, if I were to come to you and to say, hey, I would like to have $1 billion to create a spaceship to go to Mars, and the person who's going to be running this company is Copper the dog. You would never give me $1.
Right, of course.
If I go and I said the exact same thing, and I said the person who's going to be running this company is Elon Musk, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you've got the right guy. Absolutely. Where do I sign up?
Take all of my money.
So it matters, which is not to say that everybody has to be an Elon Musk. When you're describing who the team is, it's not whether they're famous or not. It's what have they accomplished in their life.
Of course. And
what is a part of their accomplishments that are relevant to the company. So in my case, I was the CIO of 2 companies. My job was to drive the productivity of workforces. So I know productivity. I am a productivity expert. I have achieved productivity goals for 2 Fortune 500 companies. So that gave me credibility. My co-founder is an incredibly accomplished engineer. So we can talk about his PhD that he got from Stanford, and the fact that he's worked at companies like Facebook and Google, and he has done a lot of very advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so you're talking about what are the attributes that are relevant to the startup. So I start with the team. And what's the problem? Why do people care? And I find that this is a tricky one, especially if you're putting together a pitch deck for a business that is not well understood by your investors. If I were to be creating a supply chain business, not all investors are going to be experts in supply chain, but they might be interested in investing in me. So you have to frame the problems that exist that in terms that people understand. Even when it's a business that they do, like calendars, everybody understands calendars. You have to frame what are the problems with calendars that people know and recognize and care about. What is it that what's your idea? What's the core thesis of what it is that you want to do? How is that different? It's very important for that difference to be defensible in some way. Like if you're successful with this, and somebody's going to want to copy it. Somebody's going to want to do the exact same thing. Is that going to be easy for them to do? Is there a first mover advantage? Are you going to have data that nobody else does? Do you have technology that nobody else does? Do you have a patent that nobody else does? So what is it that's defensible here? Because if you don't have a defensible business, you're not going to be able to drive a lot of profit. And therefore, it's not going to be a very valuable business. And if it's not going to be a very valuable business, it's going to be hard for somebody to want to invest too much in this particular space. And then the last thing is, what are your goals? Like, how are you going to be holding yourself accountable? You don't want to just say, hey, give me $1 billion and we're going to go to Mars. That's too big of a goal, right? It's going to take a decade or 2 to go to Mars. So how are we going to do that? You got to break that down. What are we going to do this year? What are we going to do with this level of funding? What are the success criteria? And then how does that break down into even more granular milestones? And what that does is it helps to de-risk the investment. I'm not just giving $1 billion to you today to go to Mars. I'm giving, maybe it's $100,000 to come up with a prototype idea that needs to be approved by NASA. I'm going to give you enough funding to build a calendaring startup to prove that the product will work and that people will use it. And at a future phase, we're going to prove that we can create a business out of it. So that's I think the core ingredients that you want to have in these pitch decks. But I would just reinforce that the most important aspect of the business are the people that are going to drive it and the stories that they have to tell about who they are. And not just who they are in terms of what they've accomplished, who they are and how they accomplish things, their character. Character attributes are incredibly difficult to fabricate. You can't make yourself what you aren't, but you can absolutely talk about what you are. And what you are, often everybody has something unique that defines them.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that for sure. Once again, we're talking to Tim Campos, the co-founder and CEO of Woven. And when you can check out woven.com, there's also a blog page there as well, where I saw some of the blogs, and one of the curious one was one about eating frogs. I'm just going to leave it at there and let you kind of check that out, Startup Nation. But also I love the type of culture that they're building there at Woven, because when you just look at the onboarding process, where they use a one-to-one personalized onboarding sessions resources to help you learn about how to use Woven in the context of who you are and how you work. And I think that's important, Startup Nation. So make sure you go to woven.com, check it out, and make sure you go to your app store to download the Woven app. Definitely want to put that in your entrepreneurial toolkit. For our next question, we're actually going to take it over to Avani a little bit. So Avani, take it away, ma'am.
All right. So I'm listening to your journey, and I mean, you came from Facebook, so like that's obviously a bigger company than a lot of people that are maybe trying to get into the startup business and be an entrepreneur. So looking back now, what advice would you give to yourself when you were just beginning to build Woven and build your startup? Like if someone was in that same position, what advice would you give them today?
A couple things. The first thing, before founding the company, I would want to make sure that I'm prepared. And the biggest thing that I have learned in this whole startup process is that it's not easy. It's hard. There are going to be days where you feel despondent, where you feel like a failure, where things aren't working. And you have to be prepared to make it through those days without giving up. Almost all startups that fail because the business gave up or the founders gave up. If those founders didn't, and there's so many stories of companies that have almost died where the founders pushed through, and as a result, they are now, big, amazing companies today. There's countless examples of that. If you don't give up, you're going to make it. But that takes grit, and you have to be prepared for it. It's easy to say, it's hard to go through. So that's the first thing I would advise myself on. Second thing, if I were to go back and redo everything, learn to get the value of your business squared away early. Whether that's a paywall or figuring out who your first your customer is. There's nothing that focuses a business more than producing value for the customer, for whomever the customer is, and whatever value means to them. It's, in some places that might be money, in other places it might be access to talent or people, but make sure that you have that value defined up front. And if people are paying you, then that means that they truly believe in the value, because they're parting with their sweat and treasure in order to achieve what your product is trying to achieve. So I would just advise people to consider doing that early. Third thing, think fast. Startups are not about, coming up and making the perfect product and everything is fantastic. You got to spend a lot of time, polishing the edges. No, a lot of the polish doesn't matter if you don't have the right core product. So you got to think fast to learn about, what those things are. And they're often not what you think they are. If you're open to that, you're not going to fail. If you think that you have it all figured out up front, and you're unwilling to see the fact that you might be wrong on something, you're going to create a lot of pain for yourself. So those are really the core pieces of advice that I would give myself. It's interesting, after you go through the entrepreneurial journey, what I just shared, what that might mean to you, how that compares to how people who haven't gone through the journey yet react to it. There's a difference between the mind and the heart. What the mind knows and what the heart feels are two very different things. And in this case, it's easy for me to impart knowledge to your mind, but many of these things you kind of have to feel. You have to feel them by going through them yourself.
Right. Experience is the best teacher.
Absolutely.
It really does take you through it. Yeah, I like what you said about fast thinking, especially because I know so many businesses have had to pivot during this coronavirus and try to figure out how to get their product out in different ways. I feel like that's really relevant, especially now.
This author, Jim Collins, wrote a great book about luck. And the key question is, does luck make a difference? Like, you have to be lucky. And the answer is, you don't have to have good luck to be fortunate, to be successful. What you have to do is be able to respond to any kind of luck, whether it's good luck or bad luck. If it's good luck, do you get to take advantage of it? If it's bad luck, do you mitigate the impact? That's the difference between good leaders and mediocre leaders. Is good leaders respond to the luck event. So it was a great insight from this gentleman that I have tons and tons of respect for.
Hey, Startup Nation. So today's content ran a bit over, and I don't want to get in trouble with my radio partners. So go to thestartuplifepodcast.com and catch the bonus content from today's episode. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.